Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 3 of the See You at the Top podcast. Today, I am joined by Justin Houle, who is VP and Chief Financial Officer over at Heartland Credit Union in Minnesota. Thanks, Justin, for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I actually first wanted to thank you for I reached out to you on LinkedIn prior
Yeah,
to even knowing you. Um, LinkedIn had actually said like this guy is in your career path, credit union role, like place that I wanted to get to, and randomly message you on asking for advice on how to get to the next level, and you were completely open and gave me a ton of great advice, which I just want to say thanks
yeah,
before we even get
absolutely.
started.
And it's a good way to just jump into or preview kind of what the whole purpose of this podcast was it really is to help people wherever they're at on their professional growth journey, because at the end of the day, we're all at different spots, and any way that we can help each other, whether it's getting started or taking the final steps to getting into the position that you're striving for. It's super important for us to be able to share our stories. So I'm glad that you reached out, because I know how it can be intimidating to reach out to someone you don't know and to just solicit them with career advice and whatnot. But I'm glad that you reached out, and obviously I'm happy to see where you've ended up at this point. And I know the path is still,
Right.
you've got a long ways ahead of you, but it's great to see where you've come along the last couple of years since you actually did reach out.
Right.
So
Yeah,
with that being said,
definitely.
let's start there. Tell me your story about how you got started in credit unions, or if you even have a little bit more backstory before that, and how you ended up where you're at.
Sure. So I've been in accounting since 2013, and I had kind of various roles of accounts payable, accounts receivable, kind of everything. I've worked at small companies, publicly traded companies, Wells Fargo for a bit that I try to forget. Um, so it really, when I first got into credit unions, it was just a job that I was looking for, a new role, and I ended up at a $2 billion organization as an accountant, which that place was really great with their members, their staff, their like the employee appreciation, all that stuff kind of got me like to fall in love with credit unions essentially. But for me, the accounting managers and senior accountants and all that were still fairly young. So I didn't see a growth like route there. So that's what made me move on to another credit union, a smaller one, as their accounting manager. Um, and then sort of the same thing, a younger CFO, and me wanting to get to the next level throughout my career. Went on to an even smaller credit union that was on about
Okay.
$30 million in assets, as their director of finance, and I was doing ACH posting, the BSA officer, the call report, financial reports, like presenting to the board. It was kind of a one man band of finance and accounting, which I loved and learned everything you could possibly learn
Yeah.
about credit unions there. Um, and so from there to being able to have all that knowledge of everything, moved on to Heartland, as their VP of finance, just a year and a half ago or so. And just from the different size, was a 2 billion down to 30 million and 200 in between there. And just to be able to see all the different sizes of credit unions, and we're all the same, but do different things. And that's kind of where seeing those things and being able to take parts from each role and see how, like, the C-suite, sort of talks with their staff and different things at all of those different organizations has sort of, I don't know, given me the insight of what I want like Heartland to be, and what I where I want to get
Yeah,
to
that's
eventually.
excellent. Well, and I think it's really great to get the different perspectives throughout your career. And it's not to say that you have to do that by any stretch of the imagination. But I had something similar where
Right.
I started in high school. I started at a smaller credit union, and then after I worked there for a while. After college, I went to work at a larger credit union, and I'll be honest, I didn't necessarily care for the larger ones. I liked the variety that you discussed in the smaller credit union role that you had, and so, but it was nice to get that insight to be able to understand the differences, even though we're all credit unions by name, and not to say that we're doing different things, but it's just on a different scale and the level of responsibility that you get
Right.
depending on the size of the organization that you're working for. So it's good to get those perspectives and be able to understand both sides of things because they both have their pluses and minuses, and so no, I think that's great that you were able to get all that experience on your path, to where you're at. So you are the VP and CFO there at Heartland. And so talk to me about the leadership role that you're currently in. When did you know that you were either striving for or you wanted to take on this responsibility?
Sure. So I think I don't know necessarily if I was like striving to be a leader in the industry or like even the organization, but like I really wanted to be able to voice my opinions and thoughts into the credit union. And being an accountant at a $2 billion credit union, they probably, I mean, sounds kind of bad, but they probably don't care what
Right.
that role necessarily thinks about the credit union. So that's kind of where my drive came from, of wanting to be at the the table, so to say, to bring my ideas and thoughts to the organization. And that's kind of where I ended up in like a leadership role, because that sort of just comes with the duties. But with that said, I also, like I said, I worked at public companies and Wells Fargo and other places, and I've kind of found the leader that I don't want
Yes.
to be through those places. And having, I always say people leave bad bosses, they don't really leave jobs. And that's sort of where I was at that point before I got into credit unions. Um, I, I had one role actually that I was even afraid to ask my boss
Wow.
questions. Just yeah, just because she like was always off put and like kind of, you should know this, why don't you know this kind of thing. So like in those experiences, I've have figured out like I want to give the people the team members like their freedom to do things and ask questions and give input and do all those kind of things. So it once I sort of had that experience, I wanted to give people sort of the leadership that I didn't have originally when I first started my
Sure.
career.
Yeah, I think in any situation like that, it's we obviously strive for great leaders to have good mentors and whatnot, but you can learn just as much. Unfortunately, it's a hard lesson a lot of times to learn, but you can learn just as much by having a weak leader or someone who really is not cut out to be a leader than you can from having a really good leader as well. So it's good that you were able to take, it's easy to look at that and be like, well, this is a really bad situation and I don't want to be here or whatnot, but you were able to take lessons from that, even if it wasn't things that you were going to do, but it was
Yeah,
things you knew you didn't want to do, or the effects that they had on her people or their people, being in your position and as someone who had to report to someone like that.
yeah, yeah. And that was a publicly traded company, so I was, my role was kind of just stay
Sure.
in your lane, do these things day to day, and that's all you do. And like you said, I want to wanted to get into the variety and being able to do everything. Like in my role now, I do the financials, but like I also can do community outreach and do pretty much whatever
Yeah.
I want, truthfully, to be able to help, grow the credit union and, um, you know, networking and doing
Yeah.
all the
Nice.
things.
On that path, was there a point when you thought, hey, I'm ready to jump into leadership? Or what was that thought process like for you?
So I don't think there was really a point where I'm like, hey, yes, I want to be a leader and I want to, manage people and do all that side of it. I think as like my duties and um, career progressed, it just sort of came with um, the role. I don't. I don't think I would ever say I'm like, yeah, I'm totally ready to go and take on the CFO role at
Mm-hmm.
Heartland, for example. Not like I don't, not that I would ever not like go for a role because of thinking I'm not ready, but I I personally don't think anyone's ever ready for any role. Like you, if to me, if you're ready and have every single checkbox and can do everything in every role, like you're probably overqualified. Because I mean, yeah, like I said, I think nobody's really ready. I mean, you can do all the trainings and have the experience, but like every situation, every organization is different. Um, so, so yeah, I think even now, I wouldn't even say I'm ready or the best, the best leader, or, I'm sure some of my staff might have other opinions, but so, I mean, yeah, there's, there's not really, yeah, just to say like, I checked this box
Yeah,
and
I
I'm
think
ready.
that's such a good point because it's easy to tell yourself that, oh, well, I just need a couple more years of experience and I'll be ready. Or I need to go through this program and I'll be ready. Or, whatever it is. And like you said,
Right.
at the end of the day, by the time we get to, I mean, it's a few years down the road, but by the time we get to retiring and we look back on our careers, we're still going to be learning things at that point in our life. And so to think that we're going to have everything figured out and you have to have everything figured out before you jump into these types of roles it's unrealistic because you're never going to master everything perfectly. You're always going to have a situation pop up. I mean, I think back to, and I forget now when did you graduate college?
So I was a late
Oh, okay.
bloomer, I guess. So I graduated with my bachelor's in
Okay.
2019, and then I went directly from the bachelor's into the master's
Oh,
program at
gotcha.
the same university. Graduated in
Okay. Very
2021.
cool. Um, so I remember, so
Yeah.
I came out of college in '09, which was right after the whole meltdown. So by the time I actually started getting into a position where I was taking on some of the accounting responsibilities and trying to understand the finance piece of things, we were already in the low rate environment. We had not dealt with rising rates, all that kind of stuff. So, to your point about not being fully prepared, the last 2 years has been eye opening and full of lessons because it's something that I can go back and read what happened in the mid 2000s and what led to the whole crisis and whatnot. But, until you actually live the environment, and then there's just so many different nuances with what happened this time around versus last time around that, again, for someone, I've talked to people who have been in the industry for 35 years and they're going, man, the things that we normally would do aren't working this time. So we have to shift and pivot and do whatever. So again, to just the point we're trying to emphasize here is that if you're listening to this thinking like, okay, well, I'm striving for this position, but I need to make sure I'm ready. The real reality is that you do a lot of the learning on the job, and so I think just having the desire to do those positions or serve in those positions is so much more important than feeling like you're completely ready. Yeah, you probably want to, like, if you're going to be CFO, you probably want some type of a background in accounting or have a little bit of experience. But other than that, if you've got some of the
Right.
experience, don't feel like you got to wait to master it because you're not going to at the end of the day. So,
Well, even to that point, my prior experience in even in the investments, we only had CD
yep.
ladders, and at Heartland we have a pretty sizable investment portfolio with all sorts of different um, investments in it, and I had never had experience, but like I feel like I could
Mm-hmm.
learn it on the job and be able to take on the challenge of doing it. So I like again to your point, like you're not going to know everything. If I'm like, hey, I need to learn everything investments, I would have never even
Right.
applied.
Right. Yep.
So,
So, that's a good segue to you. So you've been at Heartland now for a little over a year and a half, you said. And so that was obviously a conscious decision for you to make the move from where you were to jump over to Heartland for the position. What did you do to prepare yourself for that move, the move up the career path, so to speak? Are there anything that you can point your hat to and point your finger to and say like, okay, these are specific steps that I took to help prepare myself for the VP of Finance at that time role?
sure. So I think one of the bigger things, I mean, the education piece obviously is huge when you're in a finance role, because there are rules and you know, gap and all those fun things. But I think networking has been a
Yeah.
huge piece of the puzzle for me. And as an accounting person, I don't have that
Yeah.
personality, but to be able to get to, you know, a CFO role, you need to be personable, and even the networking piece of it is just go and kind of force yourself to be out there. And I attend events, and I'm like, I don't know anybody here, but we're all credit union people, so there's somebody you can talk to or
Right.
meet. And even on that piece, I think a big part of setting me up for the role at Heartland was the president that I had at the smaller credit union. Um, she was a CFO prior to being the
Okay.
CEO there, and I got to learn a ton
Awesome.
from her. And she was very open to teaching and talking about things, and it was a really great spot to be in, because she was able to share her experiences and um, sort of teach me and the things I didn't know, and sort of fill in the my
Yeah.
shortcomings, I guess, to say, to be able to prepare me for. She was retiring shortly after I was hired, so to kind of prepare me for that credit union. But her thing was always, you have the more that you learn, the more sort of tools you have in your tool bag to take to the next
That's
position.
awesome.
So even if, like, I was the BSA officer there, which, just because of size and, you know, time, so I was completely fine. I think that was even part of your advice, was to take on anything and everything, and essentially don't say no to a project. And I'll learn the BSA and the FinCEN and do all the fun compliance things,
Yeah.
just to get experience in different um, you know, sections and departments of the credit union.
Yeah. I find that it's really important. It's easy to say, okay, well, you're the CFO, so you worry about numbers and you worry about income and that kind of stuff. But to be able to understand how income is generated from other departments and just have a fuller grasp on how every department within a credit union or an organization in general, but how they intertwine with each other. And I think that's why I give that advice out, because you might be saying, well, I'm a CFO. Why would I ever need to know BSA compliance? And I'll be honest, I don't know nearly half the stuff about BSA compliance that I probably should, even in my role. But it's like I have a basic understanding because I understand the importance of it. And it's just, okay, now I can relate when I hear something there, I can relate it back to, oh, okay, well, I understand how it could impact financially or whatever. BSA is maybe not the best example, but working with the lending department, for example,
Right.
and understanding how loans they obviously drive your income, but just understanding how every dollar flows to the organization from like a CFO perspective. But it really helps, because you think, okay, well, I'm never going to use this, but you pick something up when you take on those tasks that you don't think are related, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, now I understand how it impacts my current position.
Well, even with that said, if you're only numbers and you only know numbers, like, how can you present to the board and say, we need to grow in this department, or we need to, you know, maybe pivot this strategy or something, if you don't know how the entire piece of the
Yeah,
puzzle works, or the
absolutely.
yeah. So it, yeah, I think, I mean, not I mean, you want to have detailed knowledge in your department, but I think also to understand how all the pieces fall together and how everything is interconnected.
Definitely. So you mentioned the prior CEO who gave you a lot of knowledge and information, which is a great. That's awesome. I've heard stories of CEOs who are on their way out and they're basically like, "Good luck. I had to figure it all out on my own. So good luck with doing that approach." So it's great to hear that she was willing to give back to you and pass that information on to
Oh yeah.
the next group. Were there others along the way, whether it was at prior credit unions or whether, I know we've discussed a couple times that you reached out to me and, were there other people that really helped you, whether it was with the leadership piece of things or it really just was like with the skill set side of things that really helped you along your path?
So I think being a part of MinCune, our the
Yeah.
Minnesota Credit Union Network, they have I attend like every event I can with them, and just like I said, the networking piece, but also being able to learn industry, I don't know, topics, and being able to talk to other people outside of your credit union. Um, and I think even talking to people outside of
Yeah.
finance, like I said, accounting personalities don't really attend a lot of events, but but to be able to get talk to those other people, and I think I've really lucked out with having the leaders that I've had. Every single one has been very open in teaching me, and I mean, sometimes I think I might ask too many questions that I'm bugging them, because I'm just like, if
Yeah.
anything, I'll ask anything. Um, and I think now that I say that, that's probably part of like the career progression is I'll ask. I'm fine with asking a stupid question.
Yep.
That it's just how I am, and I just want to know, that we're doing something correctly, or if somebody had seen this before,
Yeah.
whatever it is. But I guess back to the original question. I have reached out to others on LinkedIn and like through people that I know, um, just to have lunch with another CEO or CFO, or um, through the networking piece. I have a couple other CFOs in Minnesota that I chat with every now and then,
Nice.
just to talk about things. And I've participated in the um, I'm probably not going to get the name right, but it's a tri-state
Yep.
mentorship program um, through MinCune, Montana, and
Yep.
Wisconsin,
Yep.
I believe. So I have a mentor in Montana that I can reach out to and ask questions of, and that also has been very, very helpful, to see somebody in a different geographic location and be able to see what their problems are, and her experience. So I I really think that the networking piece for me in my career, and being able to meet people and do the mentorships, and messaging
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn, and the MinCune, to be able to talk to people. And now that I say that, I did the Trailblazers program
Okay.
also through MinCune. That is a sort of an executive readiness leadership program that they did. It was a year long, where they had breakout sessions for pretty much every department of a credit union. There was, they went over the call report, they went over financials, branches, lending, all those kind of things. And I think doing those things is what I think was a really big help.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we say it all the time. One of the unique characteristics of the credit union space is just our ability to collaborate and our willingness to do it. And I think that the more that we can take advantage of that, whether it is, sometimes it can get, especially on the financial side, but I get that sometimes it can get a little goofy if you're talking to someone right down the street, because you no one says that they're
Right.
competition. We're all about serving people, but there's a little bit of that. Well, I don't want to give all my secrets away, but the ability to be able to network with people across the country and to be able to have those conversations. And sometimes it is like, hey, what did you do with your investment portfolio in this situation? But sometimes it is like, tell me conceptually what you feel about, this direction or whatever. So it's nice to be able to bounce those ideas off each other, because to your point, I'm the same way. If I don't know something, I don't care how stupid it makes me look. I'm going to ask the question because I don't know the answer
Right.
at the end of the day. So even if it is obvious to every other person in the room, I want to make sure that I know, because otherwise I start assuming, and then you know what assuming does and all that stuff. So I'm the same way. And it's nice to be able to have people where I can just shoot an email to you and say, hey, what are you doing with this? Or did you see this? Or what are your thoughts on this? And to be able to get a response back so that you're not just left trying to figure it out on your own. I mean, it's huge to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah. Right. So especially if I think if you're Googling around and getting multiple different answers from different things and going directly to the source of another credit union is saves you time and you get the right
Yeah.
answer and it's yeah. I probably couldn't put more emphasis on the networking piece and going to events even like I said, like accounting personality, like I'm not that person, but to be able to force yourself to do those things. And I think too, I've also met she's currently a CEO, but that has sort of voluntold me for a lot of events and to join different organizations and do things. Who's like, yeah, this is something you should do. It'll be good for your career and to be able to have that person who will push you also to
Yeah.
do the
Well,
things.
so then I got to give you a shout out because we also did DE together last October, and so that was a very that took me out of my comfort zone. I imagine that it probably took you out of your comfort zone
Oh yeah.
too, but I mean, it was such an important event for everyone to go to. Best class ever, of course. We got to throw that in there, but just like that was it was a different opportunity. It provided networking opportunities as well, but just to be able to put yourself out there in those types of things is huge.
Right. And I mean, I wouldn't say that it was life changing, but like it was a huge like reminder that I'm not just working to make, a shareholder is a
Right.
bunch of money at the top. And it's a big reminder that we're here to help our members and, um, you know, a larger, I don't know, not, I don't want to say a
Yeah.
calling, but like it, it's not
Right.
just work.
Right.
It's, there's a larger, piece of it that it's not like just go to work and you're done and you make your money and leave. It's and that's I mean
Yeah.
could talk about this all day, but like to to be at a place where the actual bottom line isn't the true goal is why I love credit unions, even as a finance person, or I'm supposed to, you know, make sure we're making money and things, but it's not. We need to make sure this process is the absolute best, and we need to have these people in place and like there are the times that we can learn and do things and spend money on learning and um, we don't have to you know fee our members to death and um, with the crazy rates that there are out there now and we can still keep ours low because we don't have an owner at the top who's wanting to make millions and
Right.
millions of
Yeah.
dollars.
It's because we're actually making a difference. I think at the end of the day as a credit union. So I agree with what you're
Right.
saying. You've shared some really great advice along the way. So maybe the answer to the next question is one of those things you've already shared. But is there one piece of advice that you received that really changed your career?
I don't know if there's like a specific piece of advice, but I think even you had mentioned it as to just basically don't say
Hmm.
no to things. Um, I've heard that from a couple people, and I think to be able to um, even say in this role, like I've done ACH, I've done ATM balancing, I've done vault audits, I've done all of the things that roll up to this position, which has um, kind of prepared me to manage a team that does those things. And I think without wanting to do more work and learning the behind the scenes sort of what is truly happening, like for example in ATM servicing, the number goes in, number goes out, but like to be able to say like the Brinks or whoever it is serving your ATM, servicing your ATM, taking the money out, and then to piece everything together um, and see what truly is happening behind the numbers. I think what has been my biggest piece of being able to get to a higher role or leadership role, where you can explain to your team really is happening, so they understand also.
I think that's such a key point, because especially for the smaller organizations, you think CFO and you wouldn't think, hey, well, I need to lead people who are dealing with operational things, or, however your organization is ultimately structured. But so it's a lot more difficult if you get into the CFO role, because you're thinking, okay, well, obviously the finance piece. And then they're like, oh, by the way, you have to manage this side of operations, ACH, let's say you had mentioned. And if you've never had the experience behind it, it's going to be very difficult to, from the get-go, to be able to lead people and be able to guide them on what they're doing with their jobs. So to your point, your exposure
Right.
to ACH processing, as an example, just gives you a leg up, because I'm sure at some point you're like, well, I probably won't need this in my CFO role. But now you're finding that it's very useful to be able to lead people in those areas. So you
Right.
just never know what's going to be relevant to you down the road. So I think that's a great example that you shared.
Yeah, and I mean, even saying that now, this just made me think we converted our accounting system over this year. And yeah, it actually
Oh,
didn't
that's
go
good.
too bad. It was my first conversion, but the program we went to, I actually had worked on at
Oh,
another
okay.
credit union, so it was an easy. I mean, I needed some refreshers, obviously, because it was years ago, but to be able to work in another place that already had it, and they, I mean, in a way, paid for my training
Right.
to to get the program, but like it, I think to have those different experiences, and I have worked on multiple different cores. I have worked on different accounting systems, and having all of those pieces to be able to bring that experience into Heartland. Um, and like I mean, I could harp on this too, as of having the experience from a multi-billion-dollar down to $30 million and seeing the difference. I mean, like we said, they're the same, but they're
Right.
different.
Right. You've shared, along your journey to where you're currently at, you've shared a lot of learning and good opportunities, but you've also shared that there's been some challenges along the way. Maybe elaborate on some of the specific challenges that you recall during your journey to where you're currently at.
Sure. So I think the one of the biggest challenges for me, at least, is there's so many great people in the credit union industry, and relatively young people also, that I've found that there wasn't really a place for me
Mm,
to go in in uh, credit unions that I've been in the past. So for example, when the senior accountant and the accounting manager were both in their early 40s. So I mean, to me, they're not going anywhere. They've been there for X amount of years, and there's not really a path that I could see at that
yeah.
organization. Um, so, which I say this not to tell people to do it, because it was very hard to get these roles, and then it's a new learning curve every single position. But I have been somewhat of a job hopper um, to get to where I'm at. But I don't think staying at one single organization I would have ever had the experience
Yeah.
or been in the role that I am now. Um, but like I said, it's been challenging also, of different geographical areas of the drive to work. I've had an 8-minute drive, and I have a 35
Okay.
minute drive. So like there's other pieces of it, not just the job. There's, like I said, the learning curve, and then different leaders and how they want to lead their people in the direction of the credit union and things like that. It's kind of you don't know until you get there.
Yeah.
So I think I would never tell anyone to do what I did, just because of the shortness and things where I've been at other credit unions. But I think that has been sort of my struggle throughout my careers. I want to take on more, but there's just not the capacity in each of the organizations
Yeah,
that
I
I've had.
appreciate you opening up and sharing about that. Yeah, Justin and I talked about this a little bit before we started recording, of whether we wanted to talk about this, and I think why it's important to emphasize, how you got to where you're at, is that we're not saying that the only path to moving up is that you need to jump around or anything like that. But and this is not a knock against large organizations. It's just that when you have more people who are ahead of you, everyone is allowed the opportunity to advance their own careers, which just means that it sometimes does take a little bit longer when you're a little bit further down the totem pole to get to those higher up positions. And I think I will say that I know that I'm biased because I am at a smaller credit union, but there are so many smaller credit unions out there who need the talent and are looking for the talent that a lot of the large organizations are blessed to have, that are further down the totem pole just because of the hierarchy that is the organizational chart. So what I would encourage individuals listening to this, and hopefully I don't get a bunch of emails from larger CEOs chastising me for saying this, but just for your personal career path and your personal growth, I would encourage you to look outside of your own organization if there's a specific path that you are striving for. Because, to Justin's point, it's not necessarily going to be within the organization. It may come with time, but it may not. And at a time when small credit unions are going away because of mergers and a lack of succession planning, yes, we want the larger credit unions to be able to retain their talent. So that's not the point, but there are smaller ones who are going away because of that lack of talent being diversified. And so I would encourage anyone who's listening to this to take the career path that Justin did, to look at opportunities that are in your area, or maybe, for personal reasons it makes sense to move or whatever, but just look for those opportunities, because it does, not only does it benefit you, because, in your situation, you took steps forward every time you moved. So it wasn't like, hey, I'm just going to bounce around and do different things and something will play out. It was, okay, I'm being intentional with my moves. You mentioned that you struggled sometimes with I really don't want to leave, but this is a great opportunity. But then you're also, in some situations, you're saving that smaller credit union from having to consider a merger, because especially at the top with CEOs, but when they lack someone who's qualified, or they just lack a succession plan, that tends to be the go-to then, is, okay, well, we're just gonna have to merge with the larger one. And that has a ripple effect in multiple ways. So I think that's why it's important to share your story about how you got to where you're at, in the sense that it's okay to do that for multiple reasons. And it is hard. It's not an easy decision to say, okay, well, I've spent 15 years here or 10 years here and been blessed with great opportunities, but I'm going to move and jump ship. That's a very hard decision to make, but it's okay to entertain that. And again, you may be jumping into a situation where you may be saving that credit union from having to merge out.
Right. And I don't want to go on a merger tangent, but I always hate to see the smaller credit unions being merged into the $1 billion big boys, just because they're, we have the crew in Minnesota that's the young professionals. Like, every league and network wants to grow their young professionals to keep the industry alive. But I feel like when you merge them out, there's not those roles available to get the experience and learn things. Like, for example, the $30 million credit union I was at, I learned a ton of everything, from, I even tellered a little bit there. So I was, the frontline ACH processing to the call report to board reports. Like, I was able to learn the whole cycle. And if that were have been merged out, where would I be? And if that role wasn't there, but I don't want to go on a merger.
No, I get you. I agree with you there. So after discussing some of those challenges, were there places or people or routines that you incorporated in your practice that you would turn to during those challenging times to seek inspiration, or to rebuild your confidence, or just to continue to reinforce, okay, no, I'm doing the right thing, and I'm continuing to take the path that I need to, because it can be very daunting at times, and you can feel isolated, like, man, am I really doing the right thing? And people don't seem to understand why I'm doing this. So were there things that you turned
Right.
your attention to that really helped you?
So I think there's a couple things, but um, I always try to remember that we're not doing
Yep.
brain surgery. You know, it we can everything's fixable, especially in the accounting side. You can
Yep.
backdate entries and do all that stuff. We could, correct a member accounts. You could. There's not really a situation that you can't really fix. So when, I just try to remember that, it at the end of the day, we're not really. I mean, we're helping our members and doing things, but we're not, saving
Yeah.
lives really. So that sort of is where I'm like, I love it. I'm could do everything, want to learn everything, but like at the end of the day, it's not, like I said, we're not doctors and doing anything too
Right.
crazy.
Right. Yeah, I have that. I say that reminder here every once in a while, because we are a healthcare credit union. So I say, sometimes we got people coming in, and we make a mistake, and it's like, yeah, that was a bad mistake, but it is like, we do have to keep it in perspective, because when you're talking to a doctor who is a surgeon, and they make a mistake, and someone could die from it, and we say, okay, well, the worst that we do is we got
Right.
to redo paperwork, or we got to whatever. Like, it's not great, but I think it alleviates some of that pressure, because, I don't know about you, Justin, but I know I can be a perfectionist at times. So I get really hard on myself when it's like, oh, you made a bonehead mistake. Like, that was stupid. But it is like, okay, well, we are human at the end of the day. And to your point, it's like, okay, well, we can fix pretty much every mistake that we could make in some fashion. And so,
Right. And I guess too, on like the inspiration piece, and I to sort of instill confidence in myself too, and even my team. Like the I always think kind of the people that you look up to and think they're the best of the best, and they're, the greatest. They're also people. Like we're, they they're just the same as you and
right.
I, and wake up in the morning and shower and do all the things. So like we're all essentially the same. So I don't really, not that I don't have like issues with inspiration, confidence during the work day, but like I just try to remember that it's we're all people, and we can just get
Right.
the things
Right.
done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that, you in the past, you were a Wells Fargo banker, and you worked in public service and whatnot. Just talk about your decision to join the credit union movement. Now, obviously, been in it, you understand the nuances of why it's such a great industry to work in. But what actually drew you into the credit union space when you first started? And then I know what kept you here, but if there's anything else you want to elaborate on that part of it as well.
Okay. So when I first got a role, so I was at kind of like the overseer of the unions
Okay.
in Minnesota. I was doing accounts payable and some accounting, and I just the political side of everything in unions kind of is
Oh, I
draining
can't
on
imagine.
you. Yeah. And it was in 2015,
Okay.
2016, I think I was in. So I was just looking for a new job in a different industry. And I actually just found the accountant role um, just by chance and applied, and ended up getting that role. And from that credit union, they had like employee appreciation week. They we traded like Christmas gifts
Hmm.
and did all like they were really, obviously they were member first, but like their employees were really at the top of the chain of like, we need to treat
Yeah.
everybody great and want everyone to love their their job and not look at it as just a job. And there is a higher, I don't want to say this, but like
Yep.
high
No, I get
calling
it.
that I've said before, but like that is where I'm like, I love this industry. People were open to share things, and like I said, the learning, and they it was just a completely different culture from the public companies that I had worked at, where nobody talks to each other and we just do our one thing throughout the day. And it was just a complete 180 switch from where I had been in the past. And from there, I could see a true career path finally. After, I don't think we talked about this, but I tried to count earlier. I think I'm 17 jobs in
Okay.
in my life. So I've had the experience of the other places that I know I
Yeah.
don't want to be. Um, so that is what kind of got me into the credit union industry. And what I've really loved about it is, like I've said before, is we're not squeezing the last nickel out of every single process and everything. And there's not a billionaire at the top who's wanting to make all this money for themselves. And I think that's sort of what has kept me wanting to go. But also there is a true career path, especially in accounting, from accounting specialist, accountant, accounting manager, controller, VP of finance, like CFO. There's all the different levels of a real career in the
Yeah.
industry. And I was going to say, even with that said, I know there's multiple CEOs who were their first job
Mm-hmm.
was a teller. So like it's possible in this industry to move up. There's a lot of growth for people if they want it. And like I said, there's probably almost every single leader or boss that I've had tellered at some point in their career, or was a branch manager, lending or whatever it was. They're sort of a testament that there is career pathing.
Yeah,
In the
absolutely.
industry.
That's how I started, was on the teller line. And I will tell you that if my first boss had been she should have been probably more stricter with me, but she could have changed my entire career trajectory, because I was a terrible teller the first like 2 years I was working there. So I think the good Lord above that, she did not fire me those first 2 years, because she could have, and I wouldn't have thought anything of it, because I knew how bad I was, and it obviously would have changed things for me. But yeah, there's a lot of people who start at the entry level jobs and they work their way up because of the possibilities. I am going to ask you a curveball question that I didn't give you beforehand, but so you mentioned that once you got in here, you saw a career path for yourself. Was this something that you discovered on your own, or did someone, one of your managers or one of your leaders, did they actually sit down with you and say, I mean, you touched on like, okay, well, here's the logical procession through the finance department per se, but was that a realization you came to yourself that like I could do this in the credit union industry, or was it someone who's like, hey, we really think like keep you here in the credit union industry. We know you know, the experience that you've had along the way, but we really think that this is something that would be good for you.
So the actually the CFO at my first credit union, I had expressed that when I
Oh,
was
okay.
first interviewing and getting hired, that I was looking for something that had more of a career path and a career trajectory, um, to not sort of be just in the one role, and that's what you do. And talking with him, he sort of explained to me like what their career trajectories are there. And I know the accounting manager, I think, had tellered and then was a branch manager and got into accounting and was a senior accountant. And so that was a testament to, I think, majority of the accounting department actually did
Okay.
start in the front line there. So like he was able to explain that there are different levels to move up to, which didn't end up happening there. But to be able to see sort of a career and not just a job is what I
Yeah.
was looking for. Um, just because the role I had before credit unions was sort of just this is your role and you'll never really it's not really a place to go. Um, so that's what I was really looking and hoping for was an actual path that you could see and like we've said there's people who have achieved it and have done the path. So it's out there and
And it sounds to me like even though you didn't take that career path at that first credit union, that it had to have played a role in the fact that you still are in the industry in a sense that, yeah, I can't maybe move up this particular institution, but it wasn't like, okay, well, I see what the next position is. Let me look outside of the space. It was like, okay, well, let me see what I can find within the credit union movement. So I think that it sounds to me like that conversation really did have a good impact on you because it gave you like, okay, well, I can see the potential within the credit union movement, even if it's not here
right.
at this credit union.
Well, even with that said, the first credit union there probably was potential to move up the path like that, but in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
time horizon for me at least, it just wasn't something I wanted to
Yeah, I
wait
get that.
for. I guess because I started in 2018. I want to
Okay.
say at that credit union. So I've been in credit unions for 6 years and a couple months. Um, so I think I can't imagine that I would be able to have moved and progressed the way
Yeah.
I have by staying at that original
Yeah.
credit
Completely
union.
get it. Well, that's awesome. You've shared a lot of really good information here today, Justin. And I appreciate that. So we'll get you out on this. If there's, for our listeners, if there's one piece of advice that you could share with someone who's just starting out on their leadership growth trajectory tour, whatever I want to call it, what piece of advice would you share with them?
I've said this before, but I think the networking, even talking to people and outside of your departments, and even attending events through your league or your network, to be able to not just understand your specific role, but like the larger industry as a whole, I think has really helped me along the way, to be able to talk to others and kind of get a different perspective of rather than just your management team or your boss or that
Yeah.
specific credit union. Um, I I know I have a couple people even out of state that I chat with every now and then and see what their geographic area is doing and their rate environments and things like that, which is very interesting and helpful even for the metro Minneapolis area. Um, there's there's things you can do and like you wouldn't have ever thought of something on your own without talking
Yeah,
to someone
absolutely.
else. So I think and two even like I've said, the accounting personality and force yourself if you're not a networking person, just go out there and do it and somebody will come up to you and talk to you even if you don't have the opportunity to go up to them. There's a lot of people even at events that are sort of shyer and not wanting to um, talk to people, but they're all feeling the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just piggyback off that real quickly and just say, when you go to different events, it's easy to get overwhelmed because you see the number of people that are there. So just start small. Just pick one, build one connection. Don't worry about trying to get to meet
Yeah.
everyone in the room. Because I'm the same way as you. I remember going to my first CUNA Finance Council conference, and I was like, I don't know a person here, and there's a couple hundred people here, and it's very overwhelming. But you have one conversation, and you just start there, and then you have a second conversation if you feel comfortable. And so don't feel like you have to go into these things saying, I'm not a people person, but I'm going to meet 100 people today. You're just going to overwhelm yourself. So I agree with your advice there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, part of it also the mentorship programs that MinCune has had, or
Yeah.
Tri-State. Like I think CUNA has some, or America's
Hmm.
Credit Unions, but so like there's things out there, and people want to give back and help. I mean, I did attend the program as a mentee, but I'm also a
Nice.
mentor now, and working with a senior accountant at another organization. So there's people out there who want to help, and even even if it is a mentor mentee role, like I still learn from my mentee, and we talk about anything and everything, and like I said, to get different perspectives um, from other
That's awesome. Well,
organizations.
I'm glad that you're willing to pay it forward as well, to take advantage of the great advice that you've received along the way. I appreciate you joining the podcast today and just sharing your experience, because I feel you have a lot of really good insights and a lot of good examples and things that you did along your path. So I appreciate your time, and I wish you nothing but the best in the future, man. I always look forward to seeing your name pop up on my LinkedIn just to see what's going on next with you.
Yeah, I mean, really, whoever's listening, feel free to reach out, and I'm sure David can share my
Yeah, absolutely.
information, and totally open to talking to anyone, and even people with questions or whatever it is. I'm completely open.
Sounds great. Thanks, man. Appreciate it very much.